Hello, welcome to the quick overview on how to create your occupant load schedules and tags for the floor plans in all of the rooms in a very quick and efficient way, which is something Revit allows you to do. I'm using here an example of a project that's one of the TI projects, the two-level TI projects, so very similar to anything any of you might have, although probably not identical. So as always, this is just a guideline, and make sure that any decisions you make in regards to the occupant load factors and any other information you assign, you're verifying against code and you're looking at your actual floor plan. However, as far as the actual steps and the practice goes, this should be really straightforward and useful and able to be applied easily to your own project. So first step is going to be to create share parameters, and I hope you watch the share parameters and the whole lecture about schedules and parameters so you have an idea what they are. So let's go to the share parameters, and it does not exist currently, so I am going to go and create a new file. So I'm going to call it DSAT 100 share parameters. You could use that for multiple projects. You can always link to the previously created file and save. And now I'm going to create the 4 shared parameters that we need to occur in both schedules and tags. As you found out from the lectures, in order for information to occur in both tags and schedules, unless it's pre-set up a system parameter like a name or a room number, you will need to create a shared parameter to make that connection. So first we need to create a new group, and we'll call these life safety. You could also call them code analysis or anything related to the code. So life safety is a pretty common term. And then we'll create the individual parameters. So the first one is going to be occupancy. I always use all caps for shared parameters. Part of the reason for this is I might be using a name that already occurs as a system parameter or a project parameter. So by always using all caps, you'll always be able to recognize them. For example, occupancy is also a different type of a parameter that is a system parameter, but it will not work with our tags, so we need a new one. So again, I suggest you always use all caps when you are creating shared parameters so you can tell at a glance which one is which, especially if you're using a file over a long period of time. As always, it's easy to forget, be intentional with naming things. And occupancy is just text, right? A, B, and whatever it might be. So it should be, type of parameter should be text, and common is the correct discipline. Next parameter we need to create is area load factor. Now this is a calculating parameter, so this is going to be a number, your factor of 100, 15, or whatever you might be using. And next we have number of occupants, right? So that's our area divided by the occupant load factor. Once again we have a number. And then finally number of doors, which also occurs in the tags, and this is also going to be a number. So make sure you don't leave anything as length. Okay, so this is everything we need, and I'm just going to click OK and move on to the next step. Next step is going to be to create a room schedule. So we're going to go to schedule quantities and then select rooms. We're scheduling the actual rooms, the building components, and make sure you're in the correct phase, so new construction, not existing. All of your rooms should be on the new construction phase. And let's create the schedule. So now the first step is going to be determining which fields we're adding here. So we're going to add some system parameters and then some of the share parameters we just created, and then finally the last step is going to be to add some calculating parameters to do automatic calculations for us. So starting with the system parameters, we need level, because we're going to eventually sort our schedules per level. You're going to have a separate sheet schedule for each level. Then next, number. I like to add the room numbers just in case you want to sort schedules by number later on. It's always easy to take them out Sometimes it gives you reference which level you're on, and it's easier to find a room. Then name, obviously we'll be including the names in the tags, and also this is how our uses are going to functions be going to be sorted. And then finally area, since all of the occupant loads are based on the area. So these are system parameters, they automatically come with Revit, you don't have to do anything to find them. Next we're going to add our shared parameters, so we're going to go to the new parameter and go to shared category and select, and then we're just going to one by one add all of our parameters. Make sure you add them to the category. So creating a shared parameter, they don't automatically know that you want to assign them to rooms. So you want to assign them to room category. So that box needs to be checked. And then finally, I like to sort these under identity data, so you can find them in your properties later on when you look at the room properties. Okay, so we have area load factor. I'm going to do exactly the same process for all of these. Okay, so that was it for the share parameters. Now, the final thing you need to add are a couple of calculating parameters. We need to calculate the percentage of area and also the occupant load, so you don't have to do that manually. So we go to the calculated parameter. First, we'll go to the percentage of area. Now, also a naming standard, I like to identify my calculating parameters by doing what's called camel text. So you don't put any spacing in your text, and but you capitalize all of the beginnings of the words. So percentage and an area is capitalized. You could capitalize off as well. Again, no need to do that. And when you go to percentage, it's picking anything that it can make a percentage of, and it's automatically giving you area as the first option. You have all of the other numerical options there, but it is area that we want to divide by the grand total. So this is automatically going to do it for us. And then finally, the last calculation we need to do is the occupant load. So again, we go to the formula, and this time we're actually doing formula. So occupant load. And the type is going to be area, and then the formula you get to pick category, so it's going to be area divided by area load factor, and then we click OK. The calculating category is actually very similar, as I mentioned previously, to the Excel calculation. So the formulas, you can do even more complex formulas, but the simple ones will follow the same type of rules as you have in Excel. Just it's always really important to note what is it that you're calculating, what is the category. So for occupant load, you would think maybe it's a number because you're giving it a number, but it's calculated based on the area. You're dividing area by a number. So if we said a number here, the calculation wouldn't work. So being very conscious about what the actual unit is that we're utilizing. It's not always the most intuitive. And you can sort these categories in any way you want. For the sheet schedules, we will rearrange them. However, again, you can keep them this way if you wanted to have your occupant load closer to the area load factor, or again, rearrange them whichever way it works best for you. I'm just going to leave them in this order for now. Next, we're going to do some sorting and grouping. So we're going to sort everything by name. And instead of itemizing every instance to start off with, um, which would give us a lot of lines, so each room would have its individual line, just to get started, I'm not going to itemize every instance. And what this is going to give us for the room schedule, so you can see there are a lot of blanks for when the information is overlapping or when you have rooms on multiple floors, and obviously the room numbers, unless it's a unique room, is not going to add up. But what this allows us to do is to adjust the area load factor just based on the room name, which is the basic way we are assigning area load factor. Now you do want to look at the rooms individually, so if the area load factor is net, you can use the room separation lines to take out any areas of built-in elements that you might not calculate. And then things like a reception or a break room, look at it. If it's really an assembly space, it might be 15. If it's just a large open space without seating, then it might be 100. I'm going to make some assumptions here when I do this. So I'm going to assume, knowing this project, that the break room is going to be 15 with concentrated seating, because that's typical, and a cafe. Focus room is just an office space, so that's 100. Hallway circulation is just your general occupancy, 100. IDF utility rooms are 300. Large conference room is assembly unconcentrated 15. Library stacks are 100, which I'm going to assume. If it's reading area, that would be 50, so again you need to look at your room. 15 for medium conference. Lounges are usually 15 unconcentrated seating. Reception most of the time doesn't have a lot of seating, so a lot of time I count it as 100, but again look at your individual design. Small conference 15. Stairs actually don't have any load because they're a shaft. Training room is a classroom, so that's your 20. Wellness, just general office space, is 100, and workstations are obviously 100. So instead of entering this information for each individual room, I automatically populated it for all of them, and as you can see, your occupant load is already calculating there. Okay, next I'm going to collapse this even more. So I'm going to go to sorting and grouping and just sort it by level without itemizing any instance, and plop, we just have two lines. So number of doors is going to be 1 in most of the cases, so I'm going to start by entering 1 here, so I don't have to enter 1 in each row. And the occupancy in most of the cases is going to be B, so once again I'm going to just enter this once, and then going back to sorting and grouping. Now let's see what we actually have. So we are going to go back to the level and then name sorting, so have things sorted by level and by name, and this time around I'm going to itemize every instance. So now a lot of information is already filled in. We have our occupant load, and we need to enter the number of occupants manually. You cannot have a calculating value in your tags, so the number of occupants showing up in a tag is going to be manually entered, but you have a calculation here, so you can just cross-reference it easily. Now they're showing square feet because occupant load, as I said, is technically, we're dividing areas to square feet, and there are no decimal points. As you know, occupant load always needs to be rounded up to next full occupant. There are no partial occupants. So we'll go to the formatting. You can change the formatting of your occupant load, and in a field format, instead of using the project settings, I'm going to get rid of the square feet, and I'm going to give myself 2 decimal spaces so I can see where I am and if I need to be rounding up. Okay, so now we have the decimal spaces. So what we'll do now is, based on the occupant load here, I'm going to type in the rounded up number in the number of occupants. So this is one of the more time-consuming processes. A lot of these are going to be 1. And again, keep in mind there is no such thing as a partial occupant, so you're always rounding up. So this is probably the most time-consuming part, so I didn't make you watch me enter every single individual number. But the good news is we're almost done now. All this information is going to populate in a tag, so you won't have to individually click and adjust things. Now we need to go and make some modifications. So every time you have more than 49 occupants, like right here, you need to go and adjust the number of doors. So you're going to need 2 doors. And adjust your occupancy. It's going to be A3 in this case. This is an open lounge. And then if you have multiples of this room of the different size, so this one only has 45 occupants, this is still a B, this one has 58. Rename this one so it will appear as a separate line when we collapse the schedule again. So large, open lounge. Large is one easy way of distinguishing them. So this one is special from the other ones. It has 2 exits and it's an A3. Okay, going through the numbers. So we have 98. That's 2 occupants. That's a break room. It's probably food, so that would be an A2. Okay, training room, 59 occupants, again 2 doors. And training room, A3, no food usually. And make sure if you say 2 doors here, it does actually have 2 doors. Okay, 45, so some large rooms, but not oversized, 47. So there are only a couple of A occupancies here, but it's important to know them. Oh, and then my break room, that needs to be A2. Couple of lounges and a break room. We had a cafe somewhere on the project here, but see, it's just under the limit, just under 750 square feet, so it's not an A2. Next step, we are going to duplicate this room schedule and create the schedules, occupant load schedules that occur on sheets. Before we do that, I want to rename this to the occupant load schedule, and this one is not on sheets. So you want to keep one of these schedules that's where you have all the information around, you can see all of the calculations, and you can modify the data without modifying anything on your sheets, so the information remains clean. So now that I changed the name and it updated here, I'm going to duplicate the view. Okay, so this one is going to be 9th floor. And then once we set it up, we're going to duplicate that one into the 10th floor after I apply all of the filters and modifications. So 9th floor, first thing, let's go to the filter. So we're going to filter by level, and it should equal floor 9. So only the 9th floor rooms will occur. Okay, so now we need to do some additional filtering. In addition to that, by name, we're going to exempt any stairs that might be in here, so it does not equal stairs. On the fields, we no longer need everything here. We need the level because we're sorting by it, but we can get rid of the room number here. Area and area load factor should occur, although the percentage of area should go up and be right after the area. We're also going to put occupancy up before the area load factor. Then area load factor, number of doors will not occur on the sheets, just in the tags, so we can remove that. And number of occupants, remember that's our overridden one, that occurs only on tags because it's rounded up, so we're going to be left here with the occupant load. Okay, sorting and grouping, we're going to be grouping by name and itemizing every instance, and then on the grand total we want to have totals only. We're going to be adding up the occupant load, the area, and the percentage. Formatting. Hidden field, as far as the level goes, the name should be shown. Area, remember, we need to calculate totals in order for this to show up. And percentage of area, again, calculate totals. Occupancy is a shown field, no totals here. Area load factor, again, no calculation here. Occupant load, let's just check on the field format that the square footage is not showing. And here we can round it up so there are no decimal spaces. On appearance, thin lines are a good look. The title should probably go to the 1/4 inch. We want to see the title and we want to see the headers. Keep in mind you can rename the titles if you wanted everything to be all caps, which is probably a good idea. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Okay, so it's still itemizing every instance. Let's go and check. Oh yeah, so I forgot to uncheck it. So we're sorting by name, but only one line for each name, so we're not itemizing every instance. And then our occupant load is still not looking right, so let's go to the occupant load. Yeah, because we need to be calculating totals, otherwise it's just going to be showing the individual ones. And then I could have sworn, yeah, you use project settings, which is the square footage, so none of this. And we can show some decimal spaces here as we were doing elsewhere. Okay, so again, if something not showing up right in a schedule, it usually means there is a piece of data that you're missing somewhere. So our total occupant load for the floor is 379. So 2 exits are still fine, we're under 500. But you do probably need to make some adjustments, making sure the room with 2 doors actually has 2 doors, and make sure all of your paths of travel are working. And as I said, you can clean this up by changing the headers. If you change the header name, it does not actually change your parameter name. And under name, you can also do function. And then this is ready to go on a sheet. So now the last step is actually adding the tags to the floor plan. And there is a quick way of doing that. So let's go to that. This is what the room tag should look like size-wise. Now let me quickly dissect this. So what I did is I started with a regular room tag and renamed it to the occupant load room tag because it's calculating occupant load. Understand the room tag already has room name. Just change the size of the label. Make sure all of your text you modify to 330 seconds. Otherwise you're going to have really large tags. They might not fit nicely on a sheet. So bold for the room name and leaving that on top. And also the area was already there previously. So you would delete the room number and the volume, any of the error characteristics, and any of the lines that were embedded in the standard room tag, obviously after you renamed it. Now if you go to the visibility graphics settings, sometimes the annotations are turned off, so make sure annotations are showing up in the view so you can see all of your lines, any text that you're adding. Now the occupancy, the occupant load factor, the number of occupants, and the number of doors are all of our shared parameters. So how you enter those is when you go to create label, you can place the label, and under the new parameter you would go to the share parameter, you would navigate to the correct file, you would then load the particular factor. As you can see, this area load factor is already loaded under the label. And then an important part is you don't want the name to show up, you want a placeholder to show up. So here we have it 100 right here and right there as well. So I don't need a duplicate of that. Also, windows come in really large. Make sure your windows are made smaller. And you would do that with all of the other factors. Now one, to make this a fraction, is just a piece of text. So you can add a text note. It's right next to the label. And then all of the lines are just the thin lines. This is a good arrangement, so 3/4 of an inch by 1/2 of an inch. You can make the tags maybe a little bit bigger than that, but this size will fit well on the 1/8 inch. And again, make sure all of your boxes are as small as possible. You don't want a lot of these labels to spill out of the edges. And then we can load this into the project. Okay, so this is our 9th floor. Another thing to watch out here, you can see that there are no rooms in certain areas, so all of the circulation should have rooms inserted. So if this is what your room looks like on your floor plan, we actually need to go and make sure all of the square footage is populated by the rooms, because it would all have the occupant load. But once that is determined, go to your overall plan. You can turn off grid lines if you want, because we're going to have a lot of tags really quickly, and I wanted to show you a quick way to label everything. So under the Annotate tab, under Tag and Loaded Tags and Symbols, and as we scroll down to the rooms, make sure that the Occupant Load Room tag, we want to make sure areas in there is loaded. And then you can go Tag All. So we're going to select the room tag, and we're going to give it a leader, so you don't have to individually add all of the leaders. And click OK. And what this is going to do, it's going to place a room tagged in every single room in the space. Final bit of editing is we're going to edit type and add a dot to the end of our leader. And then the most consuming part of this exercise is going to be to pull out all of the individual tags. So select each one of them and pull them out of the floor area, so you can read them. They're all nicely aligned outside of the floor plan and all around the edges of the building. But again, the information is all already filled in because you organized the information in the occupant load schedule, the overall not on sheets. And then you just need to duplicate your occupant load schedule for the 9th floor, which you already set up correctly to put on a sheet. And after duplicated, change the filter to the 10th floor, and that's it. Now after that, the only other things you need to do are all of the additional steps for the passive travel, for the diagonal separation, for the exit signs, fire extinguishers, and little details like that.